Canada's Prime Minister in a matter of days. Now attention swings to Carney's views on guiding the Canadian economy and responding to the unprecedented threat coming from the Trump administration in Washington, D.C. Carney has also already said the Liberal government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has overspent. He's pledged to balance the federal budget, at least in terms of ongoing operating expenses. But what are his views on generating wealth for the country from its rich natural resources, and in particular, our oil and gas? Let's talk about it with our featured guest of the morning. Gavin Graham is Chief Investment Officer at Spire Wealth Management. He joins us from British Columbia this morning. Gavin, it's great to touch base with you. Thank you for getting up very early in BC to be our featured guest of the morning. We really appreciate it. Love to know your thoughts, Gavin, on what you think Bay Street, the business community and investors would like to see as Mark Carney speaks in more detail about to Canadians about his economic policies and vision.
Well, good to be here, Paul. Always a pleasure. And I think we have to see if the things that Mr. Carney said in his campaign to become the next Liberal leader and Prime Minister actually followed through on, which included specifically ruling out the carbon tax. So it's only April the 1st when the next increase is due to come in. Will that actually be suspended? Mr. Carney suggested that there would be a revamping of the approach to the carbon tax, maybe by taxing polluters more heavily, but it seemed to imply that it wouldn't be imposed at the consumer level. And also the increase in the capital gains tax rate, I think he ruled out as well. So we'll have the opportunity of seeing if indeed those promises made are followed through on, because as you say, we don't know exactly when Mr. Trudeau is finally going to step down. Mr. Carney has been very clear that he regards climate change as a major focus. And it is, as you said in your introduction, given the importance of oil and gas to the Canadian economy, but also given the uncertainty that's been introduced by Mr. Trump's potential tariff policies, whether or not Mr. Carney is going to change the Liberal policy for the last 10 years and actually permit, for example, pipelines to be built to the east and west coasts to actually diversify Canadian oil and gas exports away. So we will have to see. I know that in his presentation, he did say that he was willing to override provincial jurisdictions if it was important for Canada's economic security, given that this is, as he has said, one of the most stressful and dangerous times we've been in. So we will have to see in the next few weeks how those come through. But I think certainly Mr. Carney is extremely experienced. He's the ex-governor of Bank of Canada, ex-governor of the Bank of England. He was there during Brexit. So he has got experience in dealing with tumultuous times. But as always, the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating.
Everybody seems to have got religion recently on the topic of diversifying our trade away from the heavy over-reliance on the United States. But if we're going to do that, and you've addressed this already, we surely need to export more of our oil and our gas in particular to non-U.S. markets. We've got one LNG, liquefied natural gas facility, just getting set to begin operations on the coast of BC. How is it realistic, Gavin, to expect expedited approvals, a more efficient, faster approval process to increase the number of LNG facilities we have in Canada, shipping gas to non-U.S. markets?
Yes, well, you might remember after the invasion of the Ukraine, I think the German Chancellor came to ask Mr. Trudeau if they could possibly get some LNG from Canada and whether or not they could get an LNG plant on the East Coast, and was turned down. And again, the proof of the pudding is going to be exactly whether or not permissions are expedited. Mr. Eby, the Premier here in BC, has been saying that he's actually willing to remove some of the regulatory burden to get some of these important natural resources, not just oil and gas, but for example, mining, especially things like, for example, germanium, which is a very important strategic mineral, and to actually make things easier. But as always with the Canadian political process, it's you may talk a good game, but when a shovel's actually going to go in the ground, when a thing is going to get built. And if you look at the length of time it took to get the Trans Mountain pipeline extension, which was an existing pipeline that had been there for 50 years, and it took the best part of 10 years in the federal government having to step in because the process dragged out so long and cost so much. There's also the problem of inflation, the inflation cost to actually get things built, skilled labor and all the rest of it. So let's see what happens. But I think regardless of what one might feel about the way Mr. Trump goes about doing business, the shock he's given to the Canadian political system, and indeed, and we may touch on this a bit later, here in Europe as well, has been to make things which seem to be set in stone and which would never change. Suddenly now people are willing to actually address them and look at them very, very closely, because there's a recognition we can't go on as we have been.
Gavin Graham is our featured guest of the morning. He'll be with us for the full hour, and he